Hello, all. I hope you're all doing well and everyone had a productive week. This week, we are continuing with our portion review, and we are in the portion of Ekev, which in Hebrew or in English means if you follow. And this weekly portion is really talking about the blessings that will occur if one is obedient to God. Moses discusses again the directions on conquering the land of Israel, taking over Israel. He stresses to them and reminds them what happened with the remaking of the tablets, the golden calf, and he also stresses the idea that they should be aware of this cycle of exile and redemption and how it relates to participating in proper orientation with God's commandments and will. So I want to discuss a little: is it actually possible for there to be another exile? Heaven forbid. So in our history, if we look at a cyclic linear view with a recurring motif of exile and redemption, so repeatedly, then this would be possible that in the future we could experience this again. However, maybe we should be looking at things through a dialectical rise and viewpoint, right, which is going through developing from like between different conflicts, as Hegel said, within like there and then and eventually being a synthesis of these ideas, right, and a progression. So history actually progresses with time, and it's not indifferent to what's happening. And we could see then in that sense that the first and the second temples are those from which the third temple will actually arise from, right? So the process that we go through ultimately leads to a success, and from that success we can't return from that success. We could only move forward. And I would say that generally speaking, we could all see that we're not going back to the Stone Age, right? We invented the wheel, and we're not going to lose that innovation at this point, right? We're going to progress. And it's also clear that despite all the regressions we experience, both as the people of Israel, but also this is true to the whole world, throughout all of history, the peaks far surpass the downfalls and the lulls we've had as a civilization. And ultimately, at the end, God's covenant with his people really has an eternal and unchanging dimension to it. And just as a person, an individual, remains a person even though he sins, so too the people of Israel would remain God's people or God's selected people or chosen. And we've discussed what that word chosen means, even when they sin, right? And this would be contrary to some of the Christian perception, which is that we've transgressed, and so our blessing was removed or revoked. Now, we also have to realize that specifically in our portion, God says in Deuteronomy 9, it is not because of your righteousness or the uprightness of your heart that you are going to possess their land, but because of the wickedness of these nations, and to fulfill the word that the Lord swore to your ancestors, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? So really, precisely because we have such a covenant where God promises not to abandon us, he has not let us go until we actually merit to be who we were meant to be, right? And although assimilation, right, exists and is unfortunately present, individual people may leave the nation, but the nation as a whole still represents an eternal line of light throughout the history. And it really can't be interrupted. And in the blessing of the Shema that we pray multiple times a day, at night specifically, we say, in one of the portions, we say truth and faithful. In Hebrew, it would be emet ve'emunah, or truth and faithfulness. And during the day, it's different. We say truth and certainty. In Hebrew, it would be emet ve'yatziv. And certainty is a word that's actually derived from Aramaic, which is yatziva, which means also truth. So in other words, when we say truth and certainty in the Shema sequence, we're actually saying true and true. So let's expand on that a little. In Hebrew, the plural for the word truth, emet, is faith, emunat, right, in plural, where faiths are actually different approaches to the truth. So of course, faith must ultimately strive to be as close to the truth as possible, but faith will never itself be truth. Now, Rabbi Kook, which I am very fond of, as you all know, he explains that at night, a person only has faith, right? So for as long as we, the Israelites, were in exile, which is the night of the people of Israel, we have unlimited faith because the reality was so terrible that one could only believe in something miraculous and potentially irrational. On the other hand, when things begin to actually materialize during the day, right, during the redemption period, a crisis of faith begins because a person wants to, he wants the image he imagined to actually materialize, but it doesn't materialize as he actually expected. And there is then a clash between and a tension between faith and truth. Therefore, when we say during the day, we say truth and truth, right? During the daytime, during redemption, symbolically, what exists is actually true, the reality in front of me. And what doesn't exist isn't true. And when we see a decline in faith in our generation, and this is globally, it is precisely because we have already reached this time of realization, right? So there's a great difficulty to believe precisely during redemption. And we have to realize that we have returned to the family of nations and we want to actually fulfill our role. Now, we have to, of course, have to ask, what is our role? And we've spoken about this often. Our role is to be a light unto the nations. And simply that means we're supposed to establish a model of an ideal society, right, oriented towards God, that will later serve as a model for export, ultimately, for the nations of the world. Now, those who look at Israel specifically now could clearly point out various problems that we have as a society, but those who decide to look at the bigger picture, right, zoom out from a meta perspective, as Balaam the prophet did, can see that our society is, generally speaking, on an upward trend. And precisely when we're in crisis, we should strive to see, we should try to see something that's actually forming and growing and not something that's deteriorating. For example, when we see today, when people are in the search for authenticity or in the meaning crisis, well, I wouldn't say that it actually leads to a massive return to, let's say, traditional religious observance, right? So if people would ask, like, how many commandments did you actually do today? But we do see a desire for people to actually connect with a true message. And in this sense, we see actually before our eyes the fulfillment of the vision of the prophet Amos, who says, they shall wander to seek the word of the Lord, but they shall not find it. And because you have to realize, finding the actual word of the Lord, even though we're aware that the words are out there, it's not a trivial matter. It's not so simple. And our society is almost entirely is really in this search right now, and that's actually a great thing. That the ultimate search engine is what are we actually doing over here? And I would say that if as Israelites we see that the whole world, quote unquote, is against us, that's really because the world is expecting us to fulfill our destiny, and that's the tension that the world feels. And this is the task that unfortunately we have not yet accomplished. So I would say that for my Jewish brothers, we have to realize that we have much work to do. We have to still orient ourselves, and we still have to act and be that example. And to our Gentile brothers, we also ask for them to make sure that they're oriented properly, that they're looking at the zoomed out perspective, that they're seeing these trends and these changes and recognizing God's pattern through them. I wish us all a Shabbat Shalom. Take care.